Helen drifted through the asteroid field with her scanners running at maximum capacity, and her small scout ship hummed beneath her fingertips as she guided it between the tumbling rocks and ice fragments. She had been alone for 3 months now, searching the outer rim for habitable worlds, and her company back on Earth was paying her good money to find places where humanity could expand. But Helen did not do it for the credits. She did it because she loved being the first human to see something new. Her scanner beeped and Helen leaned forward in her seat because the readings made no sense at all. There was a planet ahead, but it was not showing up on any star charts, and the surface temperature readings were impossible because they fluctuated between freezing and boiling every few seconds. Helen adjusted her trajectory and brought her ship closer to investigate. The planet came into view and she gasped because it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The entire world seemed to be made of crystal and light refracted through massive geometric structures that rose from the surface like mountains made of diamond, and the whole planet sparkled with colors that shifted and changed as she watched. Helen checked her instruments again, but they still made no sense because the planet should not exist according to everything she knew about planetary formation. She decided to risk a landing and brought her ship down toward what looked like a flat plain of blue crystal. The landing was smooth and Helen suited up before opening her airlock because she had no idea what kind of atmosphere existed outside. She stepped onto the crystal surface and her boots made no sound at all because the material absorbed every vibration. Helen walked forward slowly and noticed that the crystal beneath her feet was not just reflecting light, but actually generating it from within. She knelt down and placed her gloved hand on the surface and felt a strange pulse, like a heartbeat but much slower. Then the crystal moved. Helen jumped back as the surface rippled like water and shapes began to rise up from the ground. They were tall and elegant and vaguely humanoid, but their bodies were made entirely of living crystal that flowed and shifted as they moved. The largest one stepped forward, and Helen could see what looked like a face, even though it had no actual features. Just the suggestion of eyes and a mouth formed from facets of light. The being raised one crystalline hand, and Helen heard a voice inside her helmet, but it was not coming through her radio. It was coming from inside her own head. "You are contamination." Helen swallowed hard and raised her own hands to show she meant no harm. "I am a human explorer, and I come in peace." The crystal being tilted its head and more of them emerged from the ground around her until Helen was surrounded by dozens of these living sculptures. "You are organic matter, and you do not belong here. This world is perfect and pure, and you bring chaos." Helen looked around at the beautiful crystal structures and understood what they meant. To them, she was made of messy biological material that grew and died and decayed. She was everything they were not. "I understand that I am different from you, but that does not make me contamination. I am alive just as you are alive, even if we are made of different materials." The largest being moved closer, and Helen could feel something like curiosity radiating from it. "You claim to be alive, but you are soft and temporary. You will break down and cease to exist. We are eternal and unchanging. How can you compare yourself to us?" Helen thought about this for a moment and then smiled inside her helmet. "Yes, I am temporary, and yes, I will eventually die, but that is what makes life precious. I can grow and learn and change. Can you do those things?" The crystal beings went very still, and Helen wondered if she had offended them. Then the large one spoke again. "We do not. Change is imperfection. We are already perfect in our form." Helen shook her head and walked over to a nearby crystal formation. She pulled out a small tool from her belt and tapped it gently against the crystal. A single note rang out clear and pure. "That is a beautiful sound, but it is only one note. On my world, we have something called music, where many different sounds come together to create something more beautiful than any single note alone." The crystal beings seemed to confer with each other silently. "What is this music?" Helen smiled and accessed her suit computer. She played a recording of a symphony orchestra, and the music filled her helmet. She increased the external speakers so the sound would vibrate through the crystal surface. The crystal being suddenly lit up with colors Helen had never seen before. The vibrations from the music were traveling through their world and through their bodies. They began to move and sway, and Helen realized they were experiencing something completely new. The music ended and the crystal beings stood frozen in place. The large one approached Helen and knelt down so they were at eye level. What was that? We felt it through our entire structure. Every crystal on this world resonated. With those vibrations, we have never experienced anything like this. Helen felt excitement building in her chest. That was human music, and it exists, because humans are temporary and emotional. We create art and sound and stories because we know we will not last forever. We want to leave something beautiful behind. The crystal being reached out and touched Helen's helmet with one glowing finger. Teach us, we wish to understand this. Helen spent the next several weeks living among the crystalline daughters, as they called themselves. They were all female in their own way, and their leader was the crystal matriarch who had been the first to speak to Helen. Helen taught them about organic life and how plants and animals grew from small seeds into complex forms. She showed them recordings of forests and oceans and cities. She explained how humans created families and friendships and loved each other, even though they knew everyone would eventually die. The crystalline daughters struggled to understand at first because their existence was so different. They had never known change or growth or loss, but slowly they began to see beauty in impermanence. The crystal matriarch spent the most time with Helen, asking endless questions about human experience. One day she asked Helen why humans explored space if they were so fragile and temporary. Helen thought about this and looked up at the crystal spires towering above them. Because we want to connect with others, and we want to learn and grow. Every time I meet someone new, I become a little bit different than I was before. That is what makes life an adventure. The crystal matriarch was silent for a long moment. We have existed for millions of your years, but we have never grown or changed. We thought we were perfect, but now we understand we were incomplete. You have taught us that perfection is not about staying the same forever. True perfection is about becoming something more through connection with others. Helen felt tears in her eyes because she understood what a profound shift this was for them. The crystal matriarch gathered all the crystalline daughters together and made an announcement that resonated through the entire planet. We will create a new colony, here where organic and crystalline life exist together. We will learn from each other and grow together. Helen of Earth. You are the first organic being to teach us the value of change. You are forever welcome here. Helen stayed for 6 more months, helping the crystalline daughters understand biological systems. They created gardens where earth plants grew in crystal containers, and the plants thrived in the unique light. The crystals learned to modulate their energy output to help the plants grow. In return, the plants provided organic compounds that the crystals had never encountered before. The crystalline daughters discovered they could absorb these compounds, and it allowed them to grow in new ways and create new crystal structures they had never imagined. When it was finally time for Helen to leave, the crystal matriarch gave her a gift. It was a small crystal that pulsed with inner light. This is a part of me, and it will allow us to stay connected across any distance. You have given us the gift of growth, and we will never forget you. Helen held the crystal carefully and felt warmth radiating from it. Thank you for letting me be part of your transformation. And remember that the best friendships are built on accepting our differences, not erasing them. Helen returned to Earth with her discovery, and the news spread quickly across human space. She had found not just a new planet, but a new form of life, and she had created the first true alliance between organic and inorganic beings. Scientists wanted to study the crystalline daughters, but Helen made sure that any humans who visited treated them with respect and understanding. Over the following years, the crystal planet became a symbol of what was possible when different forms of life chose cooperation over fear. The crystalline daughters developed their own form of art that combined their crystal structures with organic materials, and it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They credited humanity with teaching them that life was not about being perfect and unchanging. It was about growing and learning and connecting with others no matter how different they might be. Helen continued exploring, but she returned to the crystal planet often because the crystalline daughters had become her closest friends. She taught them new things with every visit, and they taught her to see beauty in ways she never imagined possible. The crystal matriarch told Helen one day that she had given their people the greatest gift possible, which was the understanding that being alive meant being willing to change. Helen smiled and looked out at the crystal spires that now had gardens growing between.